Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of The Sauce. We're having a nice little week here. I started off 0-2 on Tuesday night in college football. Had a great Wednesday, had a great Thursday, hit the NFL, hit an NBA parlay. I started the NBA season off with 3 straight days, so we're having a great week. Let's roll it over into Saturday. College football week 9, a lot of betting value on the board. Pretty excited for this week. I think I'm going through like 12 or 13 games in this video. Let's get it started.
Welcome to The Sauce. The Sauce. Sauce. Hey, get the sauce.
First up, we're starting in the ACC. We got Florida State on the road at Wake Forest. Wake catching 20.5 points at home, and the total is sitting at 51.5. So public's definitely on the nose here. This line was at 20 on Monday morning. It's now at 20.5. I have seen a couple 21s out there, but as of right now, consensus line is still 20.5. Money split even, so there's definitely some sharp action out there on Wake Forest. So there is an avenue here for a Wake Forest cover. They've actually been very good defensively against the pass. The Demon Deacons are 23rd in effective pass defensively this year. They held Cade Klubnik to the worst game of his season, just 131 yards passing in the game. Clemson won that game just 17-12. We know Florida State's offense relies a lot on Jordan Travis in the passing game. Now, obviously, we know the Noles have no problem running the ball as well, but they do throw the ball a lot. Over 50% of their offensive snaps are passing plays, which is 48th in the FBS in pass frequency. So again, there is a path here for Wake Forest defense to give Florida State some problems. I don't know if I can 100% get there and put my money on it, but it is possible. Also, we have to keep in mind that Wake Forest has been having problems protecting the football. In their last 2 home games, the final score looks bad. I mean, they barely beat Pitt, and before that, they lost 30-16 to Georgia Tech. They turned the ball over 7 times combined in those 2 games. In the Georgia Tech game, at first glance, it looks terrible. Like, wow, they got beat by 2 touchdowns at home by Georgia Tech. But if you take a closer look, they actually outgained Georgia Tech in that game, 400-380. They turned the ball over 5 times. 5 turnovers in that game from Wake Forest, so they probably had a realistic shot of winning that game. Look, the overall point I'm making here is this Wake Forest team might be slightly undervalued. If they're able to protect the football, they could probably keep this game pretty close. They play good defense against the pass. If Florida State is just going to run the ball on the road, I think there might be value on a Wake Forest bet. If this number hits 21, I'll take it. If not, this is most likely a pass for me. Next game. Let's move on to the Big 12. We got Oklahoma on the road at Kansas. Line is currently Kansas +9. That's down from 10. Total sitting at 66. So Kansas is looking like a pretty public dog here. The public is definitely on the Jayhawks. Some sharp action in on the Jayhawks as well. Odds makers react to it. This line was up at 10 as recent as Wednesday afternoon. It's now down to 9 on most sports books. So the matchup history is pretty one-sided here. Oklahoma has beaten Kansas 18 straight times, 18 in a row. The last time the Jayhawks beat the Sooners was back in 1997. I had just turned 9 years old. That being said, this might be the best shot Kansas has had at pulling it off since then. So obviously we know Oklahoma just had the upset scare against Central Florida last week. Dillon Gabriel was decent in the game, 25 of 38, 253 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick, a 142 passer rating. It's a decent stat line, not great. But keep in mind, the UCF defense, they struggle against a run. They actually have a solid pass defense. In fact, Dillon Gabriel's toughest 2 defensive matchups as far as pass defenses go were his last 2 games, Texas and then UCF last week. So we could be catching him at some decent value here, buying low, coming off his 2 toughest matchups against a Kansas defense that isn't very good. Kansas defensively is rated just 100th overall according to BetaRank. They can't stop the run or the pass. 99th in effective rush, 101st in effective pass. We just saw Alex Bowman cook on this Kansas Jayhawks defense, and this dude wasn't even a starting quarterback a month ago. 28 of 41, 336 yards. That's 8.2 yards per pass attempt, a 153 passer rating. It was the best game of the season and one of the best games of his 5-year collegiate career. And guess what? Oklahoma State also had no problems running the ball all over Kansas in that game as well. 218 rushing yards in the game on 5.7 yards per carry. So Kansas defense had no answers for Oklahoma State at all. If Alex Bowman and the Oklahoma State offense did that, what's one of the best quarterbacks in the FBS going to do? And even if you don't like Dillon Gabriel, because there are a lot of people out there that aren't big on Gabriel, whatever, even if you don't like him, We just saw Oklahoma rush for over 200 yards on 4.7 yards per carry on Texas, one of the best run defenses in the country. So even if you don't like Gabriel, Oklahoma should be able to run the ball over Kansas as well. I know Kansas is coming off the bye week. I know they've had 2 weeks to prep for this Oklahoma game, but I just don't think Kansas has the talent on the defensive side of the ball to make stops in this one. Now, on the other side of the ball, we know Kansas is coming into this game with a badass rushing attack. Devin Neal. I keep saying it. If you don't know who this guy is, you will. He's projected to be a 5th-round pick in the NFL draft currently. Kansas is 3rd in the FBS in effective rush, 10th and 11th in rushing yards per game and yards per carry. But you know what? We saw Mike Gundy in that Oklahoma State defense key in on the Kansas rushing attack, and they shut it down last game. It was 2 weeks ago now because of the bye. They were held to just 88 yards rushing on 3 yards per carry. With Jason being at quarterback instead of Jalen Daniels, it gives defenses a lot more flexibility to stop this rushing attack. I know Oklahoma hasn't had the craziest schedule, but you know what? Their last 2 games were both against top 25 rushing attacks in Texas and Central Florida. They held them both to under 4 yards per carry. There's just no way I could pass up on Oklahoma here. I know Kansas is coming off a bye week, like I said, but I think Oklahoma had a bit of a wake-up call last week against UCF. They should hang 40-plus points on this Kansas defense, and without Jalen Daniels at quarterback, with Jason being in, that Oklahoma run defense is just going to be too much. I don't think they can keep up. So as long as it's under 10, I'll take it. I think it's at 9 right now. So give me Oklahoma -9 next game. Let's move on to the Big Ten. We got Indiana on the road at Penn State. Penn State laying 32.5, depending on your sports book. Total sitting at 46. So public's looking pretty split even on this one, maybe slightly leaning towards Penn State. Sharps are definitely on Penn State here, and the line's moved a little. Monday morning, this one was sitting at 31. It's now at 32.5, like I said earlier. I don't know why I even included this one in here. I mean, 32.5 is a lot of points to lay with a Penn State offense that I don't really trust. I mean, they don't really look good at all offensively, but I could see them taking a lot of their Ohio State frustration out on a poor Indiana team. So this is a pass for me. I guess I'd say Indiana or pass, but this is just a pass for me. Next game. Some more Big Ten here. We got Maryland on the road at Northwestern. Line is Northwestern +14, which is up from 13.5. Total sitting at 48.5. Everyone's betting Maryland in this game, and this number just hasn't moved, which is kind of terrifying. You got Maryland coming off back-to-back losses and coming off a bye week. I mean, they should absolutely beat the life out of Northwestern. It's definitely a super square bet, a super public bet, but I see no reason to take the 14 with Northwestern here, so I'm not sure if I'll actually bet it. I'll let you know on the live show tomorrow morning, but I'm leaning Maryland. I would go Maryland or pass here. Next game. Let's talk some SEC. We got South Carolina on the road at A&M. Texas A&M laying 15.5 points now. It's up from 14. Total sitting at 52.5. So the public's pretty split even on this one. It's almost 50-50 exactly. Early sharp action came in on A&M when it was back at 14 on Monday, but now that they moved it up to 15.5, the money seems to be evening out. So South Carolina has not fared well against A&M. They're actually just 1-8 against them since 2014. The one win was last year, though. Gamecocks beat them 30-24 in Columbia. So they had lost 8 in a row entering last season and finally got the W. This one's on the road in College Station, though. As far as matching these two teams up on the field, I actually like Texas A&M's passing game. They're 14th in effective pass. The reason they're ranked so high, despite having stats at 37th and 42nd, is their schedule. They played Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn, Miami. They've played some serious defenses and still have been able to throw the ball. We do have to take note that the passing production has definitely dipped since losing Connor Wegman to injury. Max Johnson hasn't been great statistically, 224 yards per game, 124 passer rating. Those 3 games, though, that he started, Alabama, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So maybe we should cut him a little bit of slack here. This should be a great spot for Max Johnson to really put together a great game at home, coming off the bye week against a South Carolina defense that's 100% beatable. South Carolina defensively is 76th overall, 64th in effective pass, 87th in effective rush. We just saw Graham Mertz absolutely roast the Gamecocks defense a couple weeks back. I mean, most of that came in the fourth quarter. But he threw for 423 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Max Johnson, coming off back-to-back games against Alabama's defense and Tennessee's defense, gets a bye week, comes in rested. He should have a good game throwing the ball here. Now, on the other side of the ball, South Carolina does have an offense. It's a bit one-dimensional, as you probably know. Not much of a run game this year for South Carolina. 23rd in effective pass, 99th in effective rush. I personally don't think Spencer Rattler's getting enough credit. Everyone's seeing South Carolina struggle, so he's kind of just getting lumped in with that. But he's actually been really good this year. In that first week against North Carolina, he was sacked like 9 times, I think it was, 8 or 9 times. I mean, use last week as an example. Florida came back and ended up winning that game, but Spencer Rattler was awesome. 313 yards on 77% completions, 4 touchdowns and a pick, a 201 passer rating. These losses are not on Spencer Rattler. Here's what worries me about this matchup for Spencer Rattler, though. Not only does Texas A&M have a great pass defense, they're 8th in pass yards per game allowed and 20th in effective pass, but also this is the best pass rush in the entire country, and it might not even be close. Texas A&M has a 14.57% sack rate this year, which is the highest in college football. That means Texas A&M is recording a sack on almost 15% of opponents' dropbacks. Second place is Penn State at 12.4%. So they're in first place in the FBS by a large margin. Look, do I think Texas A&M is 2 touchdowns better than South Carolina? No, this number's too high, but I truly hate this matchup for the Gamecocks. I think this Texas A&M team is constructed perfectly to exploit all of South Carolina's weaknesses. I don't know if I'm going to bet it all the way up at 15 and a half, wherever it's at. But I truly think Texas A&M is going to hang 35 plus points in this game. And that pass rush, they don't have a run game to worry about with South Carolina, so they could just focus on attacking Spencer Rattler. I don't know if South Carolina is able to keep it close. So I'm leaning Texas A&M minus 15 and a half in this one. I might do Texas A&M team total over instead. I'll let you know on the live show Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. next game. Some more SEC. We got the Georgia Bulldogs on the road at Florida. Gators are catching 14 and a half points at home here. Total sitting at 49 and a half. Gators are kind of looking like a public dog here. Tickets are slightly leaning Florida, handle slightly leaning Florida. But as of right now, I haven't seen the line move. It's still sitting at 14 and a half across the board. I would imagine if the action keeps coming in leaning towards Florida, that it'll probably close at 14. So Georgia's taken 5 of the last 6 matchups against Florida. The only loss being in 2020 during the COVID season. And these teams haven't really been playing close games. In the last 9 years, the Florida-Georgia game's been decided by 1 score just once. I'm going to keep saying this because this kid just gets such an insane amount of criticism. I think Graham Mertz has been pretty good. He's completing over 76% of his passes. That's the 3rd best in the FBS. 8.5 yards per pass attempt, so he's getting the ball downfield. 12 touchdowns, 2 picks, a 164 passer rating. I don't understand why everyone hates on this guy. We've seen Florida's passing offense take a huge step forward this year. Keep in mind, they lost a quarterback that got drafted in the top 5 last year. They lost Anthony Richardson, but their passing offense has gotten much better this year. In 2022, Florida was 90th, 63rd, and 38th in pass yards per game, yards per pass attempt, and effective pass. This year, 25th, 35th, and 20th. Here's the bad news for Florida. Georgia's defense has been excellent against the pass. 12th in passing yards per game allowed, 3rd in yards per pass attempt allowed, and 3rd in effective pass. Nobody's been throwing the ball in Georgia. Now, to be fair, Georgia hasn't really seen a ton of electric passing attacks this year. They saw South Carolina, and Spencer Rattler did nothing through the air, but that was at home in Athens, and South Carolina really hasn't been the offense this year that we were expecting them to be, or at least I was expecting them to be. On the road, in the swamp, against this Florida offense will be the toughest matchup for the Georgia's defense so far. The good news for Georgia's defense will be Florida's really struggling to get the run game going. You would think with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne in the backfield that the Gators should be running the ball all over the field. Hasn't been the case at all. Florida's just 101st in rushing yards per game, 97th in yards per carry, 55th in effective rush. And Georgia's run defense is finally starting to look like Georgia's run defense. Climbing back up towards the top 25, they're currently 28th in effective rush, which is better than where they were a couple weeks ago. Kentucky has a great run game, and Georgia held them to 55 yards on the ground and just 2.4 yards per carry. So I think Georgia's defense is going to travel well here, and I think there's going to be a ton of pressure on Graham Mertz to produce. I like the matchup for Georgia's defense. But on the other side of the ball, I have some questions about this Georgia offense without Brock Bowers in it. He leads the team in both receptions and receiving yards. If you've watched any Georgia football this year, you know how important he is to that offense. Obviously, he's not going to be playing. And this isn't the Georgia offense of years past that would just pound the run game on you. Actually, Georgia's offense has been relying on the pass. Georgia does not have a top 5 rushing attack so far this year. They're all the way back at 35th in effective rush. This is an offense that needs to throw the ball. Georgia's 3rd in effective pass. I mean, this is a passing offense. We don't know how they're going to look without Brock Bowers on the field. Sure, they were able to move the ball a little bit in the second half of that Vanderbilt game, but that's Vanderbilt. I mean, this is Florida in the swamp. This is a different kind of atmosphere. Florida's defense against the pass isn't elite, but it's miles better than Vanderbilt's. Florida's 40th in passing yards per game allowed, 76 in yards per attempt, and 46 in effective pass. We're really going to see what this kid Carson Beck's made of in this game. Now, the Gators defense has struggled to stop the run, so if you think Georgia's going to show up looking like the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs and just run the shit out of the ball, I see how you could think that. But we really haven't seen it this year. And we're talking about laying over 2 touchdowns on the road. So I'm taking the points for the Gators in this one. I mean, Georgia's just 1-5-1 against the spread. They're not covering these numbers. I don't think the rushing advantage for the Bulldogs is that big. And I feel like I'm getting the better, more experienced quarterback at home. And I'm getting 14.5 points. So give me Florida plus 14.5 next game. Let's talk some Pac-12. We got Oregon on the road at Utah. Utah catching 6.5 points at home. Total sitting at 47.5. So the action's slightly leaning towards the Ducks here, but nothing crazy. Over 60% of the tickets, over 50% of the handle in on Oregon. This line did touch 7 a couple times, actually. I mean, you could probably still get a 7 out there if you like Utah, but for the most part, we're looking at 6.5s across the board. So this series has been pretty back and forth. Utah's taken 3 of the last 5. Oregon did get them at home last season, but this one's in Salt Lake City. We all know what happened last week. Utah completely spoiled USC's season with a road upset win there. What we don't know was that Bryson Barnes taking a giant step forward as the starting quarterback, or is that USC's defense being quite that bad? Because Bryson Barnes had the best game of his collegiate career. He threw for 235 yards and 3 touchdowns, over 10 yards per pass attempt. It was the first time this season a Utah quarterback has thrown for 200 or more yards. The first time all season, and that includes a game against Weber State. Just wow. But Oregon's pass defense is most definitely not USC's pass defense. I mean, it's not elite, but compared to USC, it is. Ducks are 82nd in passing yards per game allowed, but 29th in yards per attempt allowed and 38th in effective pass. The problem is Utah's offensive success comes from running the ball. It's been by far the bright spot of their offense, as I'm sure you know. They're 35th in rushing yards per game, 65th in yards per carry, and 16th in effective rush. That win against Cal, that's exactly what Utah wants to do. They want to control the clock, pound the ball between the tackles, use that offensive line. Utes rushed for 317 yards on 6 yards per carry in that game. And Cal's defense isn't terrible. I mean, they're bad against the pass, but they're pretty good against the run. The reason this is a problem, nobody's really been able to run the ball on the Ducks yet this year. Oregon's 9th in rushing yards per game allowed, 16th in yards per carry. They're 21st in effective rush. So I know people might be thinking this Utah offense is coming to life after that USC game, but I really don't like this matchup for them here against Oregon. Now, on the other side of the ball, we know Utah's got a great defense. But let's face it, I mean, USC still scored 32 points and had over 400 total yards in that game. Utes got the win, but by no means did Utah's defense shut down USC. And they're seeing another elite offense here. I mean, Bo Nix statistically has been a top 3 quarterback in college football this year. He leads the FBS in completion percentage and is 3rd in passer rating. Earlier in the season, we saw Oregon go on the road to Texas Tech, who has a pretty solid defense. Bo Nix threw for 359 yards with a 156 passer rating. So if you're thinking Utah's defense is just going to shut the Ducks down, I don't think there's evidence to support that. I mean, we saw Graham Mertz come to Rice-Eccles Stadium and throw for 333 yards. Like I said, we saw USC put up 32 points. I mean, Oregon just might be too good. I don't think Utah has the pieces. And by the way, that Ducks offense is balanced. I mean, Bo Nix may be having one of the best seasons in college football amongst quarterbacks, but this is a balanced offense. In addition to Bo Nix passing numbers, Oregon's also 10th in rushing yards per game. They average 6.2 yards per carry as a team, which is 1st in the FBS. This is a top 10 rushing attack as well. Now, Utah's defense is elite against the run. They're not going to let the Ducks rip 6.2 yards per carry on them, but I still think the Ducks offense gets the ball in the end zone a few times here, and I just don't think the Utes can keep up. Coming off that USC upset, this is a spot to fade Utah, in my opinion. I already got in at Oregon at 6.5. I thought it was going to move to 7. I gave it out in the Discord, and it actually did move to 7 and then move back down to 6.5. So I'm on the Ducks here. Oregon minus 6.5 next game. Let's move on to the ACC. We got Duke on the road at Louisville here. Cards are laying 4.5, which is up from 4. Total sitting at 46.5. So public's pretty close to even in this one, maybe slightly leaning towards the Cards. Definitely a bit of sharp action in on Louisville as well. I'm going to skip this one for now and save it for the live show tomorrow morning. Both these teams super reliant on the run, and we need to see injury reports because Riley Leonard and Jawar Jordan both questionable. That's the two most important pieces to these two offenses. So I do like the spot for Louisville coming off that ugly Pitt loss and a bye, but I'm going to save this one for the live show, 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, next game. Back to the SEC, we got Mississippi State on the road at Auburn. Auburn laying 6.5 points in this one, which is down from 7, total sitting at 41. So like I said, this line was up at 7 on Monday, and there was action coming in on Mississippi State at the time, but then they dropped the line to 6.5. Since then, everyone seems to be hammering Auburn. Auburn's starting to look like the pretty public side here. So these two teams have split in recent years. They're 3-3 in the last 6. Mississippi State has taken 2 in a row, though. They took the last 2. A lot of blowouts on here, but the last 2 years have been close, 6 points and 9 points. Obviously, the passing edge goes to Mississippi State here, but the thing is, we don't know if Will Rogers is going to be at quarterback. He didn't play last week, and of course, it's college football. They're not telling us anything. I have a feeling he's not going to play, though, so we can basically throw out all the passing numbers we have for Mississippi State on the season. If Mike Wright gets the start at quarterback again for the Bulldogs, there's just no way we can take him here. I had Mississippi State plus the points last week as one of my top bets, so I watched that entire game. Their offense did basically nothing. They had 205 total yards in the game. Mike Wright was just 8 of 12 with 85 yards through the air. The Mississippi State defense beat Arkansas, not the offense. Trust me, the final score was 7-3. I have no idea how we could possibly trust Mississippi State's offense to go on the road into Auburn and move the ball. Auburn's defense is 17th in effective pass. Yes, they're 55th in passing yards allowed per game, but look at their schedule. Look at their last 4 games. Ole Miss, LSU, Georgia, and A&M. This is a good defense, much better than Arkansas's. On the other side of the ball, we know Auburn's one-dimensional as hell, completely reliant on the run, and they're decent at it. I mean, Tank Bigsby is obviously gone, but they're still running the ball a bit this year. 29th in rushing yards per game, 43rd in yards per carry, 36th in effective rush. The problem is that actually plays directly into the strength of the Mississippi State defense. The only thing the Bulldogs can do defensively is stop the run. They're 33rd in effective rush. The reason that defense looked so good against the pass last week is that was a terrible spot for Arkansas, coming off back-to-back road games in Oxford and in Tuscaloosa. I hate this spot for Mississippi State, and I love it for Auburn. I'm not crazy about the idea of laying 6.5 points with an offense I don't really trust at all. But I think Auburn's the play here. I'm waiting this one out and saving it for the live show because obviously the Will Rogers injury update is huge. If he doesn't play, I will gladly take Auburn minus 6.5 and probably the Mississippi State team total under as well. But we'll wait. I'll let you know the final decision on the live show, 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, next game. Back out to the Pac-12, we got USC on the road at Cal. Golden Bears catching 10.5 points, which is down from 11. Total sitting at 66.5. So Cal is definitely looking like a public dog in this one. Close to 70% of the tickets are in on Cal. Sharp Action also in on Cal. Everyone's fading USC right now. As far as head-to-head history, you would think that USC has dominated this series, but that's not the case. Actually, they split 2-2 in the last 4 games. USC lost in 2021, which was their last trip out to Berkeley. Obviously, we got to start with Caleb Williams because the drop-off in production recently is just wild. Through 5 games, Caleb Williams was averaging over 320 pass yards per game, 11.4 yards per pass attempt, 21 touchdowns and 1 interception, a 222 passer rating. Looking like he was going to have the best season in the history of college football. The last 3 games, though, just 224 passing yards per game, 7.2 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns to 3 picks, and a 125 passer rating. Now, Utah and Notre Dame have tough defenses, no doubt. But this is a guy who's supposed to be playing in the NFL in 10 months. A tough FBS defense isn't supposed to neutralize him like this. Here's the good news for Caleb Williams and USC. Cal's defense is much better against the run. They've really struggled to stop the pass this year. 76th in passing yards per game allowed, 121st in yards per pass attempt allowed, and 106th in effective pass. And if you're thinking, well, Cal's at home. They can step up and play some defense at home in Berkeley. Are you sure about that? Because Cal's last home game was against Oregon State, and DJU went absolutely ballistic. Final score of that game was 52-40. I had Cal plus 6.5. I watched every snap of that game. DJU absolutely cooked on Cal's secondary. It was the best game of DJU's career so far. I know everyone's down on Caleb Williams right now. It's tough to lay a big number with him on the road. I get it. But I don't think Cal has the defensive pieces to keep him from going off. Now, on the other side of the ball, here's where this matchup gets interesting. Cal's offense has been surprisingly good, better than I expected it to be. The run game's been there all year. Cal's 17th in effective rush, but the Bears might have a passing attack brewing here. Cal's gone through 3 quarterbacks this season, but it looks like they finally found their guy. So freshman Fernando Mendoza, he took over 2 games ago. He's made 2 starts, and he's been solid. I know you might be looking at these numbers, 31 of 49, 178 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 140 passer rating. You might be looking at these numbers and thinking, Kyle, these aren't amazing. I don't get it. They're decent, but they're nothing crazy. You want to know who his opponents were in those 2 games? Oregon State and Utah. Those are 2 top 25 defenses. To start your collegiate career as a freshman in back-to-back games against Utah and Oregon State and put up numbers like that, I mean, that's a good look. Now he's at home against USC. Finally, this kid gets to see a defense that isn't terrifying, and you know he's going to have run support. Cal's got a strong rushing attack, like I said. 26 in rushing yards per game, 33rd in yards per carry. In case you forgot, USC's defense against the run is it's pretty awful. 92nd in rushing yards per game allowed, 85th in yards per carry allowed, 81st in effective rush. The question is that going to be enough? Because this Cal defense, especially against the pass, I mean, they are giving up points. Cal's given up 86 points in their last 2 games. And even though they're coming off a bye, you've got a pissed off Caleb Williams with a chip on his shoulder. I mean, I think USC's putting 50-plus points up in this game, which is why, even though I think Cal's going to score points, I don't think they can cover the number. So I'm leaning USC in this one. Trojans, USC minus 10.5 next game. Back down to the SEC. Good matchup here. Tennessee on the road at Kentucky. Kentucky catching 3.5 points at home, which is up from 3. Total sitting at 51.5. Public's pretty split on this one, looking like a dead even 50-50. Early action was coming in at Tennessee when the number was at 3, but once they moved the line up to 3.5, Kentucky got hammered. Sharps seemed to really like Kentucky at that 3.5 number. As far as matchup history goes, the Vols have been beaten up on Kentucky recently. Tennessee's taken 4 of the last 5. This one's at home in Lexington for Kentucky. You got to go all the way back to 2017 to find the last time Kentucky beat Tennessee here at home. So last week, Joe Milton had us fooled there for a quarter, right? I mean, I faded Tennessee. I said Joe Milton isn't going to be able to throw the ball in Alabama. He came out slinging the ball, and Tennessee took an early 13-0 lead. But it didn't last at all, because from that point on, Alabama beat Tennessee 34-7. Final score was 34-20. Alabama won and covered. Joe Milton did literally nothing in the second half. I think Tennessee only had 3 or 4 first downs in the entire second half of that game. So despite what we saw last week in the first quarter against Alabama, I still don't trust Joe Milton to get it done through the air. On the season, Tennessee's 25th overall offensively, 61st in effective pass, 9th in effective rush. The reason I keep talking about Joe Milton, that's how you beat this Kentucky defense. You got to throw the ball. That's their weakness. They're 102nd in passing yards per game allowed, 47th in yards per pass attempt allowed, and 65th in effective pass. Georgia showed us the blueprint on how to beat this Kentucky team. Carson Beck had the best game of his career throwing the ball. 28 of 35, 389 yards, 11.1 yards per attempt, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and a 205 passer rating. He absolutely roasted this Kentucky secondary. That's not a good matchup for Tennessee. Vols offense is relying on Jalen Wright in the run game. They're 7th in rushing yards per game, 15th in yards per carry, 9th in effective rush. Kentucky's defense has been great against the run, 13th and 12th in yards per game and yards per carry, 31st in effective rush. I don't like this matchup for Tennessee's offense at all. On the road in Lexington against the Kentucky defense coming off a bye, not a good spot. But you know what? We're looking at the same sort of matchup on the other side of the ball as well. Devin Leary really struggling to throw the ball this year. Kentucky's offense is also extremely reliant on the run. 53rd in rushing yards per game, 3rd in yards per carry, 29th in effective rush. And just like Kentucky's defense, Tennessee's defense also really good against the run. 26th and 20th in yards per game and yards per carry, 11th in effective rush. And you can't use that excuse anymore. People were saying Tennessee's defense was unproven because they haven't played a team that can run the ball. Well, they just played Alabama and held them to 3.2 yards per carry. So I think both teams struggle to move the ball in this one. I think both teams are going to try to establish the run and fail. So I'll be playing the under at 51.5. As far as a side, at 3.5, I feel like I have to take Kentucky. So I'll let you know on the live show the final decision. I'm definitely on the under at 51.5. Probably also taking Kentucky at plus 3.5 next game. Back up north to the Big Ten, we got Ohio State on the road in Madison to play Wisconsin. Wisconsin catching 14.5 points at home here, total sitting at 45.5. Another game where the public split even, almost a dead 50-50 split again. Sharp action seems to be slightly leaning towards Buckeyes, but nothing crazy. As far as matchup history goes, the Buckeyes have owned Wisconsin. Ohio State's taken 9 straight against the Badgers. Last time Wisconsin beat Ohio State was all the way back in 2010. So let's match these two teams up on the field. As we know, Ohio State offensively has been extremely reliant on the pass with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyle McCord. Run game hasn't been there all year. Trevion Henderson, I don't even know what's going on with him. I thought he was going to play in the Purdue game. Then I thought he was going to play in the Penn State game last week. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with his injury. On the season, Ohio State's offense is sitting at 13th overall, 5th in effective pass. They're all the way back at 74th in effective rush. I would expect that to improve if Trevion Henderson would ever return to the field, though. So Kyle McCord, this kid's taken a ton of criticism this year, and I truly don't get it. I mean, other than the first half of the Indiana game, which was week 1, and then the first 3 quarters of the Notre Dame game, Kyle McCord's been good. Ohio State's 18th in passing yards per game and 14th in yards per pass attempt. Penn State's supposed to have this terrifying defense, and Kyle McCord was going to be in for a long day. Well, actually ended up playing well. 286 yards through the air and a touchdown, passer rating over 140. He was solid in that game. Now, Wisconsin's defense has been solid against the pass this year. 28th in passing yards allowed per game, 10th in yards per attempt allowed, 22nd in effective pass. They're not Penn State, but that Penn State game was at home in Columbus. This time, Kyle McCord's got to go on the road to Madison. In my opinion, we don't have enough data to declare Wisconsin's pass defense good, though. I mean, what quarterback have they seen so far this year? They saw Cam Ward in Washington State. That was all the way back in week 2. We're talking, 7 weeks ago? And Cam Ward was pretty good in the game. Not great. Washington State beat him. Washington State won that game 31-22. Other than that, I mean, Hudson Card would be the best quarterback that Wisconsin's defense has seen on the year. Look at their last 3 games. Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois. Nobody on Wisconsin's schedule comes even close to Ohio State in terms of passing the ball. So yeah, I understand how you could be worried about Kyle McCord going on the road to Madison. It's a tough spot, but Jim Leonard's gone. This isn't the same Wisconsin defense. I think this Wisconsin defense against the pass is wildly unproven under Fickell. But I don't know if any of that matters, because how can you possibly have faith in the Wisconsin offense right now? Tanner Mordecai was having a bad season. He's not even there. He's hurt now. They got the backup Braden Locke starting. He's been struggling badly. Wisconsin's got to get the run game going in this one with Braylon Allen, and I just don't even know if that's possible. Ohio State might have the best defense in the country this year. They're first overall defensively, according to Beta Rank, 8th in effective rush, 1st in effective pass. We just saw Penn State and their supposedly dangerous two-headed rushing attack get completely blanked last week. 26 carries, 49 yards on the ground, just 1.8 yards per carry. I know betting-wise that this is a flat spot for Ohio State. I mean, coming off that huge Penn State game, but Wisconsin just looks awful right now. I don't see how they score points in this game on the Buckeyes defense, so I'm most likely laying them. I'm thinking either Ohio State minus 14.5 or Wisconsin team total under. I'll let you know the final decision on the live show, 10:30 a.m. next game. Back out to the Pac-12, Colorado at UCLA. UCLA laying 16.5 points at home here. That number's down from 17. Total sitting at 61. Another game where the public's pretty split even here. Sharp Action did a complete 180 in this one too. Earlier in the week, they were hitting Colorado at that 17, but then they dropped it to 16.5. Sharp money seems to be coming in on UCLA pretty heavy at 16.5. As far as matchup history goes, it's been a while since the Buffs got a win here. Colorado has not won a game on the road at UCLA since 2002. 21 years ago. I feel like I don't even need to run through the Colorado offense at this point. I mean, we all know what it is. They're completely one-dimensional, relying on the pass. They're 2nd in passing yards per game, 39th in yards per pass attempt, 21st in effective pass. What happened the last time we saw Colorado's offense get matched up against an elite defense? Oregon held them to just 159 passing yards in the game, 4.8 yards per attempt, and a 120 passer rating. Want to know who might have an even better pass defense than Oregon? UCLA. The Bruins are 4th in the FBS in effective pass. This is a great defense. They also have a great pass rush. They're 23rd in sack rate, which, as we know, is a huge problem for Colorado. So on that side of the ball, I expect to see Shedeur Sanders running for his life again, like we've seen every time they play a decent pass rush. On the other side of the ball, I mean, it's another mismatch for Colorado. UCLA's had their problems offensively, specifically at the quarterback position, but UCLA can run the ball. They're 26th in rushing yards per game, 55th in yards per carry, 11th in effective rush. 2 weeks ago against Oregon State, one of the best defenses in the conference, UCLA ran the ball 51 times for 287 yards, 5.6 yards per carry. This is the Colorado Buffaloes run defense we're talking about. It's one of the worst run defenses in the entire country. 78th in rushing yards allowed per game, 86th in yards per carry, 123rd in effective rush. We saw what Oregon's run game did to them. 38 carries, 240 yards on 6.3 yards per carry, and the Ducks took the foot off the gas in the second half of that game. Look, betting-wise, this is a great spot for Colorado. Not only coming off the bye week, but coming off a pretty humiliating loss to Stanford their last time out. And you got UCLA coming off back-to-back road games. I could see how betting-wise this is a beautiful spot for Colorado, but I still can't do it. I like the matchup for UCLA too much, so I'm going to lay it. Give me UCLA minus 16.5. That's all the games I have time to get to. We'll go through a lot more on the live show at 10:30 a.m. If you're able to make it, I would love to see you in the comments. I think we had 19 or 20 lined up for the live show tomorrow. If you want our top bets for all sports, parlays of the day, if you want to join our Discord, anything like that, head over to KyleKirms.com. The information's right there on the homepage. College football week 9, pretty loaded Saturday betting wise. Let's have ourselves a great weekend. Remember to bet responsibly, and I'll talk to you in the Discord.